For years, bonds felt like background music, present, polite, ignorable. Yields were sleepy, headlines were elsewhere, and the common refrain was that bonds were dead because interest rates hugged the floor. Then the world changed. Inflation woke up, central banks slammed the brakes, and coupons that once looked like pocket lint started sounding like rent checks again. Suddenly, every calm investor you know is whispering the same thing: bonds are back. The question that actually matters is simpler and more personal. Should you own them, and if so, which ones, where, and how much? This is a tour through bonds in plain language: what they do, when they shine, when they sulk, and how to fit them into a life built for options rather than anxiety. A bond is a loan with a schedule and a promise. You lend money to a government, a city, or a company, they pay you periodic interest, and at maturity, they give you your principal back. The two numbers that run the show are the coupon, which is the interest rate stated on the bond, and the yield, which is the actual return you'd get if you bought it today at today's price and held to maturity while all payments arrive on time. Yield moves because price moves, and price moves because new information changes the market's sense of future interest rates and credit risk. The seesaw matters. When yields rise, existing bond prices fall. When yields fall, existing bond prices rise. If that sounds like stocks in reverse, that's not a bad mental model. Bonds are the rope that tethers your portfolio to gravity while stocks try to jump. The simplest way to think about owning bonds is to ask what job you need them to do. There are three classic jobs. The first is ballast. Bonds tamp down portfolio swings so you can sleep and stay invested when stocks throw a fit. The second is paycheck. Bonds can produce steady cash flows you can plan around, useful in retirement or for funding near-term goals. The third is hedge. In many historical episodes, high-quality government bonds rose when stocks fell, buying you insurance that paid in real time. None of these jobs are guaranteed every year. There are periods when stocks and bonds both wobble, but over full cycles, allocating a slice of your portfolio to bonds has been one of the most reliable ways to trade a little return for a lot of calm. But didn't bonds get crushed recently? Yes. Rising inflation and rapid rate hikes punished existing bonds because their low coupons looked worse next to new bonds paying more. Prices fell and headlines shouted. That pain, paradoxically, is what recreated opportunity. Yields reset higher. Today, the expected return of a plain vanilla bond fund over the next 5 to 10 years is roughly its starting yield, plus or minus a bit for credit events and small price changes. When starting yields are tiny, expected returns are tiny. When starting yields are respectable, bonds begin to earn their keep again. You don't need to predict the next rate move with a spreadsheet. You need to recognize that buying future income at today's improved yields makes sense if the job you're hiring bonds to do is still a job you need done. Quality and maturity are the two dials you actually control. Quality is about who you're lending to: governments, blue-chip corporations, smaller companies with shakier balance sheets, local municipalities. Maturity is about how long until you get your money back: months, years, or decades. Higher quality means lower default risk and usually lower yield. Longer maturity means more sensitivity to rate changes, more price upside if yields fall later, but more downside if they rise further. Most investors don't need to max either dial. They need an adult middle: high-quality government and investment-grade corporates for stability, with maturities clustered around the short and intermediate part of the curve so rate moves don't whip their account around like a windsock. There is also the question of how to own bonds: individual issues, funds, or ladders. Individual bonds are precise. If you hold to maturity and the issuer stays solvent, you can ignore market prices and collect your coupon and principal. The precision comes with chores: sourcing, diversification, reinvestment when bonds mature, and the risk of picking a name that looks fine until it isn't. Funds and ETFs remove most chores. They own hundreds of bonds, roll maturities automatically, and distribute interest monthly. Prices wiggle more because a fund never matures, but your income stream can be steadier and your risk spread wider. Ladders, owning bonds that mature at staggered dates, split the difference. They let you see when cash returns to you while still diversifying across time. If you like clarity and control, ladders of government or high-grade bonds are a calm choice. If you like simplicity, a low-cost total bond or intermediate-term bond ETF quietly does the work while you live your life. Inflation is the villain that can make fixed coupons feel small. If your bond pays 4% while prices rise 5%, your purchasing power shrinks even as your account shows tidy income. You fight this in two ways. First, you don't ask bonds to do a job they're bad at. Beating inflation over decades, that's what stocks, real estate, and your career are for. Second, you use inflation-aware instruments where appropriate. Treasury inflation-protected securities adjust their principal with inflation. Their real yield, the return above inflation, is what matters. When real yields are decent, TIPS are a way to lock in purchasing power for a slice of your fixed income bucket. For very short-term cash, high-yield savings, money market funds, and short T-bills can outpace headline inflation during tightening cycles without much drama. You build the overall plan assuming that some parts fight inflation through growth and some parts provide stability through coupons. That blend, not a single product, is your defense. Credit risk is the other villain. Government bonds in stable countries default rarely. Corporate bonds carry business risk. The extra yield they pay over governments is called spread, and spreads widen when fear rises. Chasing the highest corporate yields, high-yield or junk bonds, can feel like a free lunch until a recession flips the table and defaults chew through your coupon cushion. This doesn't mean you never touch credit. It means you size it modestly, prefer diversified funds to single issuers, and remember the job you hired bonds to do: calm and cash flow. If you want growth with drama, you already own stocks. You don't need to smuggle drama into your bond sleeve and then wonder why the ballast sloshes. Taxes matter more with bonds than many investors realize, because bond income is often taxed at ordinary income rates. Where you park them changes how much you keep. Tax-advantaged accounts are a natural home for bond funds that throw off monthly interest. In taxable accounts, you may prefer municipal bonds if your local tax system rewards them, or you might tilt toward equity index funds in taxable and keep the bonds in tax-deferred accounts. The right answer depends on your jurisdiction, your marginal rate, and your goals, but the principle is stable. Put the most tax-inefficient income engines in the most tax-sheltered garages. Duration is a word that scares people until they translate it. Think of duration as interest rate sensitivity in years. A fund with a duration of 6 will roughly lose 6% in price if yields across its portfolio rise 1 percentage point, and gain 6% if they fall 1 point, all else equal. Duration lets you match your bond sleeve to your nerves and your timeline. If you're saving for a near-term purchase, low duration keeps the floor from moving under your feet. If you're building long-term income and can tolerate price wiggles, intermediate duration brings a better mix of yield and stability. Extremely long duration, 30-year bonds, are a specialty tool, not a default. They swing like teenagers and are best left to investors making specific macro bets or matching very long liabilities. What about the fear that bonds are unsafe now because inflation might flare again or because governments carry a lot of debt? Risk is real, but it isn't binary. You control the mix and the maturity, you diversify across issuers, you accept that the bond sleeve exists to make the whole portfolio more resilient, not to eliminate all risk. In fact, one of the underappreciated benefits of owning bonds when yields are decent is that they refill themselves. As funds roll maturing bonds into new ones at today's higher yields, your income stream ratchets up quietly. Falling prices on existing holdings hurt on paper in the transition, but the engine you own becomes stronger. You don't need clairvoyance. You need patience, structure, and an understanding that the passage of time is a feature in fixed income, not just in stocks. A common anxiety is, what if I lock in now and rates go even higher? The honest answer is that you'll feel a little silly for a while, and then you'll be fine. If you ladder maturities, only a slice of your money is locked at any one yield, and each rung that matures can be reinvested at whatever the world offers then. If you own a fund, it is doing this for you continuously. If rates fall instead, the bonds you own will rise in price, and your earlier yields will look wise. The trap is paralysis, waiting for the perfect entry and missing a year of respectable income because you were haunted by a hypothetical 0.1%. Treat bonds like groceries, not like antiques. You buy them because you need what they do every week, not because you think you've caught the bottom tick of human history.
How much should you own? There is no sacred percentage.
Rules of thumb like age in bonds were invented when interest rates, life expectancies, and retirement structures were different. A better approach is to start with your need for cash and your capacity for risk. If you have a secure job, a deep emergency fund, and decades until you'll spend from your portfolio, your bond slice can be small and focused on short and intermediate governments for balance. If you are within 5 to 10 years of needing withdrawals, or if portfolio swings make you consider turning off contributions in bad markets, a larger bond allocation is a kindness to your future self. The most practical way to size it is behavioral. Hold enough bonds that a nasty year in stocks won't make you abandon your plan. If you sleep through storms, you've got the mix right. Bonds are not just for retirees, they're for goals with dates. A house down payment in 3 years, tuition starting in 4, a sabbatical fund you'll spend from next summer, all of these deserve a home that doesn't wobble like an index fund. You can carve out sub-accounts, one sleeve for long-term growth, mostly equities, one sleeve for medium-term goals, short to intermediate bonds, tips if the real yield is sensible, and one for near-term cash, T-bills, money market funds, insured deposits. The illusion that stocks always come back is true over long spans and catastrophically naive over short ones. Bonds exist so your calendar doesn't have to apologize to your dreams. You will hear elegant arguments at dinner about yield curves, forward rates, and term premiums. Useful, but not necessary to get this right. Your bond plan can be remarkably simple. Pick a low-cost, broad bond fund as a core. Add a short-term fund if near-term stability matters. Consider a slice of tips for purchasing power if real yields are fair. Keep credit risk modest and diversified. Rebalance once or twice a year. Park the bond sleeve in tax-sheltered accounts when you can. Increase contributions automatically when your salary rises. None of these steps require timing genius. They require deciding once and then leaving the machinery alone. There are seasons when bonds and stocks both fall. Balanced portfolios feel pointless in those seasons. This is where perspective pays. The reason you hold both is not that one always zigs when the other zags. It's that each has different long-term drivers and different failure modes. Stocks create wealth by growing profits. Bonds preserve purchasing power and provide spendable cash with less drama. In the years where both seem to forget their lines, your job is to keep the stage lights on and wait for the script to resume. Markets are not moral, they are weather. Your role is not to predict the storm path, it is to own a house built to code with food in the pantry. If you are tempted to spice up your bond sleeve with exotic fare, emerging market debt, long-duration zeros, structured credit, pause and write the job description again. If the job is ballast and paycheck, adding complexity can quietly swap the ballast for bungee cords. There is a time and place for every instrument, but most households reach their goals with boring tools used consistently. Fancy is a hobby. Hobbies require budgets and time. If you cannot explain in one sentence how a bond product earns its yield and what could make that yield disappear, it is not an income solution. It is a story you heard at a party. There's also the question of where to start if you've avoided bonds for years. Start small and visible. Move a sliver of your portfolio into a short or intermediate government bond fund. Watch how its monthly income and price behavior differ from your stock funds. Add gradually until the mix feels like you. If you have specific dates, build a mini ladder that matures around those dates. Experience cures theory. A few months of watching coupons accumulate will teach you more than a dozen charts. Retirees, or anyone living from their portfolio, can add one more layer, a cash flow runway. Hold a year or two of planned withdrawals in very short-term instruments. Behind that, hold intermediate bonds. Behind that, hold equities. When stocks are generous, top up the front buckets. When stocks are punishing, spend from cash and bonds and let equities heal. This bucket approach doesn't maximize every academic measure of return, but it maximizes the real measure that matters, the chance you stick with your plan and sleep. The dividend from a well-designed bond sleeve is not just interest, it's patience. Bonds do not require faith, they require math and manners. The math is the yield you lock in and the duration you accept. The manners are your promise to your future self that you will not treat a long-term plan like a slot machine after one bad headline. If you choose high-quality, appropriate maturities, low costs, and tax-sensible homes for your holdings, you will look back in a decade and see that the quiet part of your portfolio did exactly what you asked. It reduced drama, funded goals with dates, and gave your stocks a partner that doesn't get bored when markets do. So, are bonds back? The better statement is that the price of safety went on sale and then normalized. Yields high enough to matter returned. The toolbox you were told to throw away was never broken, it was just underfilled. Should you own bonds? If you have any goals sooner than someday, if headlines ever tempt you to sabotage your own plan, if seeing steady cash arrive helps you act like an investor instead of a spectator, then yes, own them. Not because they are exciting, but because you want a life where excitement happens in your work, your people, and your free time, not in your brokerage app. Bonds make portfolios quieter. Quieter portfolios make better lives. That, not a ticker, is the result you're actually after.